Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
And our guest this morning is the Mayor of the Horowhenua, Bernie Wanden. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, John.
We heard on the news yesterday that the courthouse in Wanden is closing. I imagine that is causing some concern in the community.
Look, it will be. And look, just to make sure that people understand that it is only a temporary closure, that it will be open, we hope, by the end of February. There is some work that needs to be done that involves an area where the staff and the public are part of, so they can't do that while the place is open, unfortunately. And so they've taken the opportunity to do it over the summer, and hopefully it'll be finished by the end of February.
Is it thought that the summer, the holiday period, is a quiet time for the court?
Well, the court is busy all the time. There's
Yes.
no doubt that. So at least through that sort of Christmas, January period, hopefully there's less work. The normal, but look, the wheels of justice are always busy.
Indeed. In fact, you could make the case that they can be especially busy over the holiday period, and New Year seems to generate a business for the courthouses as well. We heard from Michael Scott, who's a prominent lawyer in Waikanae and who spends a lot of his time in the Wanden court, that he was concerned that there could be some denial of justice, that some people may have difficulty heading to the Manawatu courthouse, appearing on time and therefore possibly incurring more penalty as a result. Is that a concern of yours as well?
Look, the concern is that anything, justice delayed is justice not being able to be, sort of sorted out. And that is an issue. There's no doubt that will impact on those that are sort of facing either court or even just day-to-day operational type of things that they won't be able to do in the office. And I would imagine that the justice system is probably either going to delay some work, or we'll try and work out other ways. I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't sort of enable it to be able to just find another room in another building somewhere. This day and age, you can't just do that. There's a lot of stuff that goes into managing and any court or any court work like that.
Absolutely, not the least of which is security, I should imagine, which unfortunately is a very real concern for the justice system these days. Now, this sort of leads into the next subject I'd like to talk about, which is transport. Michael was saying that possibly some people would have difficulty making their way to the Manawatu. And there's a bit of a hit job going on in the Horowhenua, I see. The HITS, the Horowhenua Integrated Transport Strategy. What is the implication of HITS for the Horowhenua?
Well, with our growth, with the possibility of having the expressway finished in the next 10, hopefully, years, we need to identify where we see our transport needs going in the next 20 to 30 years. And that's pretty much where the Integrated Transport Strategy was born out of. Now that O2NL business case and designation has been sorted, we believe that it's now time to think about the future and what we can do. So we're talking about not just cars and vehicles. We're obviously talking about rail. We're talking about bus. We're talking about all modes of transport, really.
Indeed, and I say this is a bit of a partnership between the NZTA, the Transport Agency, and also the Regional Council. So obviously some genuine work has already been put into this.
There definitely has. So what we're doing now, there's been a governance group been set up for some months now that has been looking at the whole strategy. We're now getting some feedback from the community in terms of how they see the future. So, and that will then form the basis which will be presented to Council before Christmas. And hopefully we'll be able to let people know where we're heading or where we think we should be heading for the future.
And when would you expect to report back those conclusions?
Well, as I say, the strategy will be presented to Council before Christmas. If Council will adopt that strategy, I assume.
Yes.
And then we'll be working towards, a planned sort of strategy framework that we can make some decisions about our future. And as you can imagine, I mean, a lot of this is not next 2-3 years, but it's more 5 to 10 years, even longer out.
As it should be in many respects. It's interesting you mentioned buses and trains, because I think this is the area where the Horowhenua is not well served. And with the influx, particularly of older people heading into the Horowhenua, public transport becomes a very important consideration, because many people as they get older either give up their licences or should give up their licences. And for that to happen, they need a viable public transport option. Do you think that exists? And if not, do you think it should exist?
Look, I agree with you, John. It probably doesn't exist presently. And look, I've already had discussions with Horizons about maybe some way we can look at a sort of a strategy for within the district. There is no doubt that as people grow older and, as you say, don't want to drive on our roads or, sort of lose their licence, then they need that capability to be able to get to services, get to health centres, do their shopping, do whatever they need to. And we need some sort of transport strategy that will enable them to do that easily and conveniently without too much effort.
I think there's a very real issue here. I've been having discussions with central government people in terms of housing in the Kapiti Coast area, and it's sort of dawned on me retrospectively that there's a view in Wellington that we need to densify housing around transport hubs, so people can easily get onto public transport. And that sounds fine in the big cities. I think it's more difficult to do it in the rural areas and the sort of the suburban areas that we tend to live in. And it is difficult to persuade people to get into medium or even high density housing, and also to arrange it so that is nice and close to transport hubs. Do you think that we've got an issue in real New Zealand that people in the cities may have difficulty appreciating?
I couldn't agree more, John. There is a disconnect between what happens in metropolitan areas as rural and provincial areas. And you can imagine those that live in places like Shannon or Foxton Beach or even Foxton itself, who want to get to services that they cannot easily, aren't available in their own little towns, want to get to Palmerston North or want to get to Levin, then it is not easy for them. Generally, I mean, there's a number of shuttles that are used in the community, like the health shuttle here, which is a fantastic service.
Yeah, it sure
but,
is.
There are many others that can do. And for affordability, for ease and convenience, you can understand why people want to live in those areas. But there are some challenges around getting them to a service. And that's where we need to be as a council, much more community engaged, I suppose, and understanding the needs of the community and their transport requirements.
But it's a matter of making it pay, isn't it? Do you think public transport in rural areas can be viable, is a goer?
Look, viability is a completely different issue. If we did everything on the economic viability, then most services probably wouldn't be maintained.
Yeah.
The reality is that we still have to provide some sort of service, though, and we need to subsidise that with rates or whatever. Then I think we need to look at it seriously.
Interesting times to come. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Bernie.
Cheers, John.
Okay, that's Bernie Wanden, Mayor of the Horowhenua.
106.3 Beach FM.